So here we are, 22nd of April, and then the raiding party finally arrives at the port of Zeebrugge.
About 1:45 to midnight, everything had gone pretty well to plan. It was dark. There were fast motor patrol boats laying a thick smoke screen here in front of the Vindictive and the other vessels. There we can see the mole with the lighthouse just on the end. There were German guns positioned all along there. They could obviously hear the vessels in the dark, but couldn't see them, didn't know exactly what was going to be happening.
On the port side, we could see a dark mass looming large through the fog, and we knew we were nearing the mole. Excitement was at fever heat, and our nerves strained to the utmost. The silence was appalling.
And then suddenly, the wind changes.
Whoa.
The wind starts to blow off the land, and the smoke screen disperses.
There's no more cover, so there they are in full view then.
Absolutely.
And still all the way to go.
They've got another 300 meters to go, and now they're in full view of the German guns. Then all hell broke loose. The German guns opened fire.
Where was your Uncle Albert at that time?
Well, he was on the deck of the Vindictive. He was one of the raiding parties. There were ramps along the side of the Vindictive waiting to be lowered onto the mole, the harbour wall, and there were 12 ramps. In the first outbreak of fire, 10 of those ramps were destroyed, and 50 men were killed.
It sounded as if someone pulled the props from under the sky, and I fell down. These thundering and banging and ear-splitting sounds continued, and even then we could hear the wails of anguish of the wounded and the dying.
So here we are, finally, just like they were, approaching the gates of hell.
Absolutely. We're now right up against, you can see up against the side of the mole here, and you can see how intimidating it is. The whole of the top of the mole there would have been raked by German fire, and the problem was that the Vindictive was lower in the water than they had planned, and there were only 2 ramps usable to lower down onto the top of the mole to get the troops on. The first thing is they couldn't get the grappling irons hooked onto the mole to pull the Vindictive in, so there was a quick change of plan. The ferry Daffodil moved round and acted like a tugboat and pushed the Vindictive in against the side of the mole here and stayed there pushing the Vindictive in. When the ramps were lowered, they should have been at this sort of angle, but in fact, because of the height of the deck, they were at that sort of angle. So it was a very difficult task to get up a ramp carrying all that equipment. And the whole time, the Germans were firing. The whole of the top of the mole here was raked with machine gun fire. So it was really, as you said, like stepping into the gates of hell.
And Albert was waiting all the time to get on top of the mole.
It took 15 minutes after the Vindictive arrived here at the mole before they could get the first troops up onto the mole. And Albert was one of the first to arrive on the top of the mole.
The water on the mess deck was no longer water. It was a mixture of the blood of British seamen, their heads, arms, legs and trunks torn to bits, mixed up with food and mess utensils. I can't ask you to imagine this. You couldn't.
This reclaimed land here was all sea at the time. The Vindictive is here up against the mole. You can just see the superstructure with the crow's nest, with the machine gunner firing, and the Germans then were in a destroyer here, moored on the other side of the mole. They were firing directly, only about 100 meters away, directly. So this whole area was covered, sprayed with machine gun fire. So Albert appears up one of the 2 ramps to the left, carrying his Lewis gun, jumps onto the top of the mole here, onto this parapet.
So what was he supposed to do once he got on top?
So the first thing is to get off this area, which was just a death trap, and they had to either jump down here, either on ropes or on ladders that they had with them, or they used some of the ladders that were here, down onto the base of the mole to engage the Germans. And of course there was a huge fighting the whole way through this operation.
Ondertussen nadert, zoals gepland, een kleine Engelse duikboot zo goed als onopgemerkt het viaduct dat de mole met de wal verbindt.
We ran right into the middle of it and stuck there as intended. I do not think anybody said a word except, "We're here all right."
Was the attack with the sub successful?
Yes, the attack with the submarine was successful. It exploded underneath the viaduct which connected the mole to the mainland. That cut off the electricity, any reinforcements, so there were no searchlights, so the people on the mole couldn't tell the mainland what was going on.
And in the meantime, there was still fierce fighting going on here.
There was fierce hand-to-hand fighting. Down here on the mole, you can see that the 40 or so troops that managed to get off the Vindictive and actually engage the Germans were here engaged in very heavy fighting. There were several hundred troops on the Iris and the Daffodil who were meant to get onto the mole, but they couldn't get up onto the parapet.
Sir Albert was here pretty much on his own.
It was a very small number of troops actually engaged in the fighting, absolutely. So then Albert was wounded in the foot, and then he was wounded in the back, but he carried on fighting the whole way through that. But eventually, when the signal was given, they had to withdraw. Luckily, Albert's friend, his colleague from the Lewis gun team, managed to carry him all the way back here onto the parapet and back down onto the Vindictive.
And all this was just a diversion?
This was just a diversionary attack. The whole object of the exercise was for the block ships that came in here just through the end of the mole, across here, into the canal, to block the canal.
Als dat lukte, zaten de Duitse onderzeeërs in de val. Maritiem archeoloog Thomas Termote toont mij hoe de raid verder verliep.
Ginder bovenop de mol wordt er hevig gevochten en ondertussen varen hier aan de voet van de vuurtoren de blokschepen de haven binnen. So tell me, what happened to young Albert when he got back?
Well, Albert was chosen by his shipmates to receive the Victoria Cross, to represent all of them. And he went to Buckingham Palace and received his medal from the King in the summer. And then in October of that year, sadly, he died in the Spanish flu pandemic, aged just 19.
And that was it?
And that was it, sadly, yeah.
Do you think, looking back, that it was all worth it?
Well, nobody has got more admiration than me for Albert and for his bravery, and I'll do my utmost, and have done my utmost to keep his memory alive. But if you say, was it worth it for all those young men to be killed, British and German, no, I couldn't possibly say that. O England, mourn thy gallant sons, marines and sailors too, who died like paladins of old, to king and country true. But dry thy tears, for every age their glory shall extol. So when you hail St. George's Day, remember Zeebrugge's mole.